World Talk Radio.
We're here today with Stephan Harding to have a conversation. I feel super grateful to have the opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you.
Stephan, for anyone who doesn't know, is a supremely nature-connected person who has spent a lifetime studying nature and our planet. Zoology at the University of Durham.
Yeah.
Followed by a doctorate at Oxford University.
Right.
And then back to Venezuela. I think you worked for the Smithsonian.
Yeah, well, you've done your homework pretty well.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
It took all of 2 minutes on a Google search.
Good memory, though. Good memory.
Okay, so you've got all in there.
Yeah.
And for me, I was lucky enough to spend a week with you last year on a rewilding course with yourself and John Young.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, you're such a great role model for what a scientist could be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And we were talking about one of the talks that we saw you do online, and we were saying how, you're definitely not following the mechanistic model.
No.
And in service of Gaia and living, breathing system.
Thank you, that's nice. Very affirming to hear that.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just great seeing you in action with John, especially. But how much awe and wonder that you have for our planet and love for it. And it was just a joy to be around and truly inspirational. So thank you for that.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Great feedback, thank you.
So we normally start with just asking if you would be willing to share what you're grateful for.
Oh, right. Yes, now, well, I'm grateful to be part of this lustrous, living, animate earth. To be able to have a consciousness that can appreciate it, and also, I'm also grateful to science, even though I have a lot of problems with the way science is done at the moment. I'm also very grateful to the science for giving us these incredible stories about the earth, about how ancient she is, about how life evolved, about communication between bacteria, about even the genetic code. It's all just so amazing. So I'm grateful to be the recipient of that sort of scientific heritage. And I'm also grateful to some of the explorers of human consciousness and of Gaian consciousness, people like Carl Jung, for example, and some of the great spiritual masters of our species. So I'm deeply grateful to them. I mean, I can just go on and on and on. I'm grateful to the bacteria, to the fungi,
Yeah. So you're head of holistic science here at Schumacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, and author of The Animate Earth, Science, Intuition and Gaia.
Well done. More excellent homework.
So we were wondering if you could talk a little bit about Gaia theory and
Okay, well, for me, Gaia has different dimensions, or different levels of depth, you could say. And I think they need to be brought together to give you a really holistic picture of Gaia and a real sort of experience of Gaia. So the most shallow, I would say, has got to do with the rational mind, and that's the science of Gaia. But it's when I say shallow, it doesn't mean unimportant, but it's the level that is easiest to deal with, easiest for all of us to agree on, because it's about sort of numbers and facts and scientific experiments and data. And I should have mentioned another person I'm very grateful to is, of course, James Lovelock, who taught the first course at Schumacher College when I was here as the resident ecologist. So I began working with him, and he was one of my great teachers. So Lovelock came up with this really startling and really important revolutionary idea about the nature of the Earth, which he then called the Gaia hypothesis. Because before Lovelock, the idea was that the Earth was just a great ball of rock, which it is really, but a ball of rock with a thin smear of life on the surface, and the life was just irrelevant. It had no say in what the temperature of the surface was, or the mixture of the atmospheric gases, or anything like that. It was either a passive passenger on this ball of rock hurtling around the sun. Interesting, amazing, this biosphere, but, just really pretty insignificant. Life was just hanging on by its toenails, this hugely massive ball of rock hurtling around the sun. And then Lovelock, through a series of very interesting, I would say, synchronicities, received the idea that was wrong, that view of the Earth was wrong, that in fact the living beings, the biota, have a huge impact on the rocks, the atmosphere and the water, and that in fact those two aspects of the Earth, the living beings and the rocks, the atmosphere and the water, they're tightly coupled through feedback, he said, and that something truly amazing and unexpected emerges from the coupling between those two components, which is the ability of the whole Earth, the whole planet, to regulate key aspects of the surface, such as temperature, acidity, distribution of key elements. So he later called that the Gaia hypothesis, which brings us to the second, deeper level for me of Gaia, which is you could say the mythological dimension, or the depth psychology, I prefer depth psychology, dimension of Gaia. Because Gaia is, of course, the ancient Greek name for the divinity of the earth. And it gives the earth a tremendous personhood. Gaia is a huge personhood. She's a goddess. In fact, in the ancient Greek myth, Gaia was the firstborn of primordial chaos. So in a way, she is the embodiment of the great intelligence of the universe. She is its first manifestation into matter. So it's very deep, you see. And so this aspect of Gaia, this depth psychology aspect, has the sense that Gaia, which is also at the same time the whole cosmos, as well as being the earth, it has a purpose, it's up to something. It's not meaningless, this whole business of life on the planet, life in the universe itself. It's all up to something. There's a huge telos, a huge purposefulness in it. And we humans can be part of that if we learn to tune ourselves, to tune our psyches into that mythological, depth psychological dimension. So for me, Gaia has, you could say, these two aspects. And it's interesting because they're opposites. One is the more rational approach to Gaia, which is the science of Gaia, or what we could now call Earth system science, with all the information about the history of the Earth and the evolution, Darwin's evolutionary insights, all of that scientific stuff. That's one side of it, that's the rational side. You could say that's the male sun side of it, to be alchemical about it. Then over here, there's the moon side, the feminine, which is to do with the myth of Gaia, the depth of Gaia, the mysterious purposefulness, which the science, of course, denies. And so what I try to do in my own life and my own work here at the college and teaching is to bring these together. So we get a unity, or a reconciliation of those opposites. In my own experience, when that happens, you have an experience of being Gaia'd. So you can have an experience, and it's hard to describe this, but it's an expansion of, well, something, I wasn't going to say expansion of consciousness, something happens in your consciousness, and you suddenly, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, you suddenly become aware of the hugeness of the earth and the vast extent of her rainforests, of her oceans, of her mountains, of her deserts. You can feel them extending out in all directions from where you're sitting. And you suddenly realize that you're part of this huge living being that's been evolving over 4,600 million years. It's a very indigenous, aboriginal sort of feeling. Very earthy. It's very earthy. It's not sort of ethereal intellectual at all. There is an intellectual component to it, but it's more, I feel it's very, I almost become like an indigenous person. It's a very indigenous, ancient kind of understanding, but it's mixed together with our modern Western scientific understanding. And so I think it's the first time humans have been able to experience Gaia in this sort of way. And I think for me, it's deeply, deeply inspiring, exciting, comforting. It gives me a sense of my own purpose, which is to cultivate this sort of Gaian view and to share it with the students here. Well, did I answer your question? I forgot what the question was now. What is Gaia?
You definitely did, yeah. I love this being Gaia'd.
Being
Gaia'd.
Yeah, being Gaia'd.
What was your first, or maybe deepest, experience of being Gaia'd, Stephan?
Well, it's difficult to pick out anything. I mean, I have been lucky to have quite a few. But, well, I remember when I was about 7, we were living in London. We'd come from Venezuela, where I was born. We were living in a block of flats in London. And there was a garden downstairs belonging to the block of flats. And I used to go down there and turn over stones and find little woodlice. And I would spend ages just with the woodlice, you know, just looking at them and wondering, marvellous little creatures. And just completely being woodlice, you know. You know that when all your other thoughts stop and you're just totally taken up with the life of another little being. So I remember that very clearly. And then also with earthworms and spiders, you know. So, I mean, I'm a zoologist in my very core, you know. I mean, it's amazing to have that in your life, to have something that you just know that you are. So I'm just a zoologist. That's it, and there's no question about it. But then I've had many other experiences, just even here in my garden, just sitting in my garden. There are certain birds I find that have a sort of switch on that kind of consciousness in me. One of them is the bullfinch. Whenever a bullfinch appears, which is not very often in my garden, they're very shy and secretive. But when they show themselves to me, that's always a very special moment. And I feel there's that sort of opening and remembering of the living body of the earth in this very Aboriginal way. It's so hard to describe. You see, it's very easy with science. You just have an equation, everyone can get it. But this is much more subtle and difficult, and very personal, actually.
Yeah.
I think it appears for everyone in their own way. So it's not as if there's one way, like there is with an equation or a bit of science. For the rational mind, we can all agree. This more mythological depth psychology aspect is very personal. It's like a personal revelation. But we can all have our own personal revelations. Mine is no one better than anyone else's, and we need to sort of share them somehow. The other bird that I find very magical in that sense is the woodpecker. The greater spotted woodpecker, you know. So these are kind of triggers for me whenever I hear the woodpecker. Even that's all it takes. Somehow it reminds me, it jolts me back into that sort of Gaian consciousness. Then, of course, I've been lucky to be in very wild places in my life before they were seriously disturbed. In Venezuela, where I was born, but in Costa Rica, in Africa, in Australia, in Norway, to be in really wild places. And there, of course, you know, you can just feel the magnificent being and personality and psyche of such places. Again, very hard to describe, you know, what it's like to be in the outback in Western Australia, say in the Pilbara. Wild. And in places where no white people have ever been. Sleeping under the stars, you know, with your sleeping bag just outside, just looking at the stars and feeling the wonderful wildness all around you. Totally itself. It's made itself, from out of itself, with no human interference at all. Well, that's not true, of course. The Aboriginal people were making fire and things. So with interaction with people, but still wild. With people who really felt the dreaming of the land and felt the stories in the land and were inspired by the psyche of the land. So, you know, those are some of the moments I've had.
Yeah, on one of the videos I heard you talk about people finding their sense of place, and that when they find their sense of place within their locality, that almost gives them the grounding to then expand outwards. And I was wondering if you could perhaps share with people any ways in which people can go about in doing that and enhancing that.
Yeah, it's very simple, really. Well, it's simple for us living in the countryside. It's not so easy for people in cities, but the thing to do is to, as you say, find a place. I think John Young calls it a sit spot. I call it a Gaia'd spot, but it's the same thing. So it's somewhere you sort of saunter around, go on a saunter. This is an idea from one of our teachers, Craig Holdridge in America, a wonderful teacher of Goethean science. He has this notion of sauntering. So you go outside with no particular aim, although maybe this time you're looking for a sit spot to find you, or a Gaia'd spot to find you, but you go very open, with your perception open. You just wander around, say in the woods, if you've got some woods near you, or wherever you are, on the moor or wherever you happen to be, but if you're lucky enough to be out in nature, and you just call to a place. Say, where are you? Where are you? I need to find somewhere where you and I can make a relationship. The you in this case is your sit spot. And you saunter and you feel your way until you find somewhere where it just feels really good to be, where there's a sort of magic, where there's a communication. You feel there's a communication. It could be a tree that communicates with you. It could be a rock. It could be a piece of grass. Who knows? But something will call to you and almost speak to you in some way, in an inner way. And that's your sit spot. And then you make a commitment. You might make an offering to it. Maybe you bring, in America they use tobacco, to make offerings. But you bring something that's, even a leaf. A leaf is better because it breaks down. It hasn't been manufactured. So you bring something and make an offering. And then you go there whenever you can. Once a week, every few days, and you just go there and just watch and listen with no agenda. And you'll see things. You will hear things. Things will appear to you. Birds will appear. Leaves will flutter down. And eventually you'll calm down so much that you'll find that when these things happen, birds appear, leaves flutter down, they have a tremendous meaning. There's a meaning, and it's an extraordinarily mysterious thing. Say a robin suddenly appearing on a branch and looking at you has some kind of meaning, almost like a dream.
Yeah.
Like a dream image. That then you're connecting with the deeper aspects of the psyche. I say the psyche, not your psyche, because you're entering into the psyche, which is the psyche of Gaia, the psyche of the cosmos, and the flow of things. This is a bit like the Tao, the flow of things. You begin to get a sense of this flow and what it is, in a way that you don't normally notice in your everyday life, because we're so caught up with, particularly in the West, with organising this, organising that, this meeting, that meeting, with cutting time up into little sections. All of that can drop away in your sit spot, and you start feeling this other flow, which is the underflow of things, the real flow of things, below the chatter of the rational mind, the Tao, in a sense. It's a wonderful thing to feel that. It's just as you know, it's a tremendous relief to feel that nature is flowing in that way. And then you just go back and back, take a book to read of the right kind. I like Lawrence van der Post very much. I would recommend. I love The Heart of the Hunter, about the Bushmen,
Nice.
and their spirituality. That for me is a great book to read in my sit spot. And then you maybe do some drawings, or you don't have to do any of that. The main thing is just to be there, to make a commitment to that place, as you would with a person, and just go back again and again and again over many, many years, the better. And then this thing just starts cultivating. It's a way of nourishing your soul and cultivating your soul. But it also, I think, gives something to nature. It's not just you cultivating your soul. By doing that, you're also enhancing the psyche of nature. It sounds crazy to the rational mind, but somehow you're giving something back to nature by doing that. I think nature loves it. Gaia loves it when a human being sits down and just looks and stays in one of her places. I think that helps her to become more aware, more conscious. It gives her what she needs from humans. That's all we're here for, actually. We're here to do that. So that's what we can do with our Gaia spot.
Yeah, nice.
How long have you been doing your Gaia spot, Stephan?
I've had my Gaia spot here in our little garden at Schumacher College for 27 years.
Wow. Nice ropes of relationship.
Yeah, it's become a wonderful place for me.
I remember you were talking about now, after that length of time and that level of commitment to your sit spot, about you becoming a gateway for some of the other animals that you have been in contact with and built ropes around the world.
Yeah, I don't want to. It's very careful that I wouldn't say I am a gateway. This business of one's ego is a tricky business.
Yeah.
You don't want to get inflated with it.
For sure.
I am this great.
I am the portal.
It's happening to me. You have to be very careful with that. On the other hand, so that's the thing one has to handle, because these experiences can make you very inflated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh wow, aren't I amazing? I've got this. Well, this isn't you. This isn't you. Of course, it nourishes the you, but the ego has to know its place. That's very important for me. Humility is very important.
Yeah.
Like humus of soil, you know.
Yes.
So it's a very humble thing. But so, having said that, I've had the experiences from time to time when these different wild places where I've been and spent time in the world, Costa Rica, Africa, Australia, Norway, places like that. They give me a sort of visitation in my sit spot. They come and visit, and all of a sudden it's very wild, my sit spot. You know, all of a sudden I'm there. I know I'm in England, but at the same time I'm in the Sengwer bush of Zimbabwe near the Zambezi, where I spent a lot of time when I was a young man, about 19 years old. Suddenly that really comes back. Wow. And it's England, but it's not England. And then suddenly I can see a kudu walking through the vegetation, you know, and I can hear a Von der Decken's hornbill. And then that will go, and then maybe a piece of Western Australia will come, and Costa Rica. And it's as if these places are meeting each other. They're coming to meet each other and communicate with each other in my sit spot. But it needs this human to be there to do it, and to be open to it. But they're meeting each other and finding their own fulfillment in meeting each other through a human consciousness. It needs a human consciousness to do it. That's our role. That seems to be one of our roles in Gaia. And then, of course, I'm nourished by it. But these places are also nourished by it. And my sit spot is nourished by it. So it's a mutual nourishment. It's quite a wonderful thing, you know. So I come out of my sit spot, and there's just a few steps from our house. I mean, literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 or 12 steps. And then I say to Julia, my wife, I've just been with Western Australia, and I don't know what she thinks about it. But it's a wonderful thing, really wonderful. And I think that's open to all of us, to everybody.
Because I watched a video from 2008, I think it was, and you were doing an interview. You were going through the incredibly depressing list of scientific facts about increasing temperature levels, CO2 levels, levels of McDonald's restaurants exponentially increasing. We're 10 years further down the line. How are we doing, Stephan, as a member of the scientific community? Are those figures any better, any worse?
Well, I hate to say it, but they're worse. Yeah, they're worse, definitely. I mean, the temperatures keep increasing. Severe weather events, as you know, are more common all over the planet. Biodiversity loss is increasing. We've had a report from the Living Planet Index from WWF and the UN also showing the decline of population sizes of species, as well as extinctions. So it's not just that species are going extinct, which they are, but the ones that are surviving are experiencing lower population sizes. And then you know all about the climate situation. So, yeah, it's not good. It's worse than it was 10 years ago. But on the other hand, could it be that there's more consciousness developing? I have a sense there is. There's more of a Gaian consciousness surfacing from the depths of the psyche into humans. I think it's gradually happening. We had the Paris Climate Summit in 2015, which was organised partly by one of our graduates in holistic science, Tom Karnak.
Okay.
Marvellous. In fact, he made that chair that you're sitting in.
Oh, very nice. Thank you, Tom.
And then another one of our graduates in holistic science, Nigel Topping. So, and that was a very important conference. I know that there were no sort of binding pledges made, but consciousness was raised. You know, and there is more and more consciousness developing. So I find that heartening. It's a question of whether, obviously, that consciousness will translate into action, which will happen quick enough to help us avoid the worst of these changes to the planet. I don't know.
Well, will it happen quick enough? And I remember doing the deep time walk with you, and there's several points in evolution, and I remember one particularly because I was playing some sort of cell, I forget which.
Oh yeah.
When there's a cell and it's eating a particular different chemical, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was an environmental change, which meant if it continued doing that, it would perish.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it made a new agreement with the other thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then ingested it, and it became part of a multicellular organism
Right.
instantaneously.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, is this possible in the time that we're in, where suddenly there could be an instantaneous evolution, if you like?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's possible we could have a very quick shift in human consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That's possible.
Mhm.
The problem is that once the carbon dioxide or the carbon gets into the atmosphere, it takes a long time to get it out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to really get it out into limestone and chalk at the bottom of the ocean takes at least 100,000 years, which is not long from a Gaia'd point of view. But whilst it's in there, in the atmosphere, it can do a lot of damage by changing the climate. So that's a fact we can't get round. And there doesn't seem to be any very effective way of extracting CO2 from the atmosphere. So even if we have a rapid change of consciousness, imagine everyone tomorrow suddenly wakes up, including Trump, wakes up in the morning, opens the curtains in his room in the White House and thinks, oh my God, what have I done? I'm wrecking the planet, oh my God, what have I done? I'll do something about it. And everybody, Bolsonaro in Brazil wakes up and, oh, what am I doing? I'm cutting down the Amazon. That's Italian.
Yeah.
Well, he sounds like he has an Italian background. Anyway, if everyone did that, and we worked on a war footing, the whole of humanity around the planet, that's our aim. All of us are completely focused on that. We still won't be able to avoid 1.5 degrees. And that's already, we've already got just over 1 degree global average temperature increase relative to pre-industrial levels, and you can see what's happening with that. So if we get to 1.5, it's going to be pretty heavy, but we can probably manage it. If we get to 2, then it's very serious. So, it doesn't look that promising, really, in terms of us really being able to get a handle on this. We could if we all worked on it right now. So that's, I suppose, that if we want to pray for something, is to pray for this radical change of consciousness in people. There's a lot to ask for, though.
More sit spots for people.
More sit spots, less consumption.
Yes.
Like Christmas, we all buy stuff, well, not all of us, but many people buy loads of stuff, and it makes things worse.
Yes, it does.
So can you imagine a wave of deep ecological realization sweeping the planet this Christmas? I mean, if we asked Santa Claus for anything, it would be, please send a wave of ecological realization to the planet. So you don't have to go down chimneys so much or at all this Christmas.
Scatter
For your own
seeds.
benefit.
Right.
Dear sense.
Scatter seeds, yeah.
Yeah.
So, the outlook, and we have to be realistic, it's not that great. But there's always a little bit of hope.